first of all, thank you all for coming. We are very excited to have you here. I think this summit is kind of a peak mark for us in a very long process, together with Chainlink, but also internal process that we have done, and we started months and months ago to understand what we want to do in blockchain. And I think that blockchain is such an exciting space, but for us as a traditional VC, it was very clear that we want to do something different. So for those of you who don't know Pitango is the largest VC in Israel. We're managing more than $3 billion money under management. And we are very, very excited to enter into blockchain with First Labs. First Lab, it's our blockchain venture. It's an amazing mixture between a foundry and a VC, and we are very excited to work with Israeli entrepreneurs and to help them grow companies and big companies in the blockchain space. When we started the process, we did an ideation process like any other startup that we know. And what we came with the conclusion that we need to do something more. We need to grow from the community, and we need to do something for the community, which for me, this is the community. You are the best of the best. We are happy to have you here. And we are always here, by the way, to help you grow, to help you do the things that you want to do in blockchain. And the main theme of First Lab is to build bridges. We build bridges between Web 2 and Web 3. We are a big believer that what's happening in the crypto island can transfer into Web 2. We focus on main three pillars. One is the community, and Hackathon and educational program is just a part of it. We're doing so much to help people in Israel understand what blockchain can become, and we're doing it with an amazing people. We call them the council member, and they are all sitting here, which I'm very excited about. It's Amit, and it's Ty from Market Across, and it's Oren, and it's Tomer Weiss, and we are so honored to have them. And I think what is different in blockchain, that you cannot be part of it if you are not talking the language, if you are not doing what you're supposed to do, and you are not playing by the rules of this specific place. So what we try to do is to bring traditional VC into blockchain, and I'm happy to say that after a long time, I'm feeling very confident that we're doing something right. If you are all here, and we have this amazing partnership with Outlier Venture, with Chainlink, with Collider VC, which are like the first crypto-native fund in Israel, and Chainwire, and other amazing partners like Kuti, which is a startup that grew back then when we have 2017 crisis, and now we have it here. So I think what I'm trying to say, and I'm not going to steal any more time from the other speaker, is that if you feel that you want to do something in blockchain, our offices that are located in Tel Aviv, by the way, for those of you that booked a meeting with me and came to Herzliya, it's in Tel Aviv. So it's always there, it's always open. We are so happy to meet you, even just for a discussion or a coffee. It was a very interesting process, and I want just to thank the Pitango partnership, and specifically the Pitango first team, Eyal Itzkovich and Eyal Niv, that is going to be here in a short time, Gad Huldai and Yari Kasuto and Ori Barzilai, that are all amazing people that helping me do this thing. I'm not doing it alone. And I just want to say a huge thank to Eden from Pitango. You probably got 1,000 emails from Eden by now, but she is not the reason for the 1,000 email, it's me. But she has worked so hard, and I'm so proud to see you grow and to see what you have done here. So thank you everyone for coming. I wish you to have a fruitful day, to enjoy the content, to enjoy the startup competition, and to enjoy the lunch that we have for you. And that's it. I think that the next keynote is going to be much more interesting than me. But thank you all for coming once again.
Hi, good morning, everyone. It's great to see you all. My name is Hila, and today I would like to take 2 minutes of your time to say thank you, and afterwards to introduce you to one of the most inspiring startups in Israel, Reichman University. So first of all, thank you very much to our partners from Pitango, Eyal, Ayal, Aviv, an alumni, Eden, a student, and of course, thank you very much to our own very own Dana Barda. Dana, she's out, for this professional production as always. So with no further ado, I will take 2 minutes of your time to talk a little bit about us. So Reichman University is actually an amazing startup established in 1994 by this young founder, Professor Uriel Reichman, who wanted to have the vision to build a relevant and updated academy. Today we have almost 9,000 students studying BA, MA, and PhD. More than 2,500 students in the international schools from 91 countries, 36 labs and research centers. You're welcome to visit our augmented reality lab. It's mind-blowing. The synthetic biology lab, the Me lab upstairs, doing super innovative stuff. We have over 40,000 alumni spread worldwide, and a super strong mindset and DNA of entrepreneurship. So strong that we're actually the first and only university in Israel to have a designated school teaching, researching, and promoting entrepreneurship, the ASE. It's the school that's hosting us today, led by the Dean, Dr. Yossi Ma'aravi. Here students can major in entrepreneurship and combine it with data science, computer science, business of course, and economics. And I think that what makes this school so unique is the deep and strong relationship between the school and the industry. The school is operating the largest internship program in Israel, working with over 300 VCs, startups, and corporates, meaning that every student can find himself very early throughout his studies, meeting the industry, gaining practical knowledge, getting priceless network to help him grow to the next step of his life. And I think it's an amazing opportunity, dozens of opportunities every day. And as always, numbers tell the story the best. Thanks to AWS and Fresh Fund, we learned last May they made a very comprehensive research showing that Reichman University's alumni started over 300 startups, raised more than $2 billion, and performed dozens of exits and over 14 unicorns, which of course those numbers are crazy comparing to the nominal size of the university in the population. And of course, I'm sure some of you know some of the brands in this slide. So it's a huge pride, and this is why it was a supernatural step to establish Reichman University Venture, our new VC fund. We are a pre-seed fund, a generalist fund, focusing on extraordinary founders. We invest mainly in alumni, but not necessarily. We're open to everyone, so our door is open to founders from all the industry. And we are offering physical home and professional home for founders who want to use the assets of the university, the knowledge, the connections, the labs, the very strong relationship with the industry, and we're backed by top-tier investors. Among them, of course, it's the Pitango Fund. So enjoy your day, and we hope to see you all here very soon. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. It's a real privilege to be here. Thank you for the Pitango Fund for putting this summit on. We're very privileged to be supporting this summit, and it's great to see the breadth of talent there is in both the Web 2 and Web 3 spheres here in Tel Aviv and Israel more broadly. As Eden mentioned, I'm Halcyon. I'm a business development lead at Chainlink Labs, based out of London. It's my first time here in Israel, so it's great to be here. Now, today what I'm going to be talking to you about is the significance of cryptographic guaranteed relationships and what this is bringing to the Web3 and even the Web2 spaces, and the new, I would say, standard of trust minimized applications that cryptographic guarantees is bringing to this space. So without further ado, who here has watched the Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma? Can I get a show of hands? Anyone? Great, right. So this analogy should make sense. So what The Social Dilemma captured was just kind of one example of a number of high-profile events where institutions have fractured or eroded trust with folks around certain privacy, security, and guarantees or trust assumptions that people thought they had, and then it turned out in certain situations were not true. So that's just one example. Now, the reason I bring this up is because when things like this happen in society, it often introduces new kind of defense mechanisms that emerge, one of which in this example is end-to-end encryption, which emerged as a cryptographic guarantee and a new standard for instant messaging. So I don't know if kind of this resonates for the rest of you, but kind of 10, 15 years ago, when I was messaging friends, family, etc., you would often send messages containing sensitive information, whether it was your Wi-Fi password or login details for Netflix, for example. And there was no kind of concept around this end-to-end encryption standard. Only when events like this have taken place has it given rise to the emergence of new standards like this. And the reason I bring this up is because what cryptographic guarantees bring in, and what this is an example of, is that when people have certain trust assumptions that are broken, and you show people that there are guarantees that can be deterministically provided via code, via cryptographic guarantees, people realize that they would always choose these over brand reputation, brand promises, or what we call paper promises. Now, end-to-end encryption became a benchmark in instant messaging, so much so that today, for those of you who use Signal, WhatsApp, Telegram, you'll see that at the start of new messaging sessions, not only does it say this messaging session is end-to-end encrypted, but it also gives you a description about what that encryption entails, right? And so this has basically resulted in a new benchmark that is the minimum standard that people will accept for instant messaging. And what we at Chainlink believe is that this is not unique to just certain verticals like communication or instant messaging, but also industries like finance. And what you'll go on to see during this presentation is more broadly any sort of digital agreements in any industries. So this is another example. I'm sure many of you are aware of the GameStop debacle with Robinhood that resulted again in some fractured trust, where people had certain trust assumptions that it turned out wasn't true. So this is kind of another example, and this is something that's given rise, it's instances like this that have given rise to the proliferation of DeFi applications, smart contract technologies, and then also use cases for Oracle solutions, which is the space that Chainlink's working in. So our belief is very much, as I mentioned before, that these sort of cryptographic guarantees will apply to all sorts of different industries, not just instant messaging, not just finance, but a whole scope of other verticals. And what's important is what cryptographic guarantees is bringing in is a certain new type of application, which is a new benchmark or a new standard called trust minimized applications. Now, trust minimized applications is a spectrum. So it doesn't just apply to Web3 companies and projects, but also Web2. An example of Web2 companies where cryptographic guarantees are being brought in, those of you who are interested in kind of the gaming space, you'll see that there are a lot of gaming projects that at this current point in time see that it's not feasible maybe to build a complete game on-chain. And what they're doing is they're providing aspects of ownership of, say, like in-game assets on-chain to basically provide these, this cryptographic guarantee rather than trust assumptions around ownership of in-game assets. That's kind of one example. At the other end of the spectrum, you have fully on-chain contracts like DeFi protocols, where all assumptions, or not assumptions, but all, I suppose, like beliefs and trust is demonstrated on-chain. So at the moment, it's very much kind of a small subset of industries that are kind of fully on-chain and maybe benefiting from smart contract technology, oracles, and the rest. As mentioned, our belief is that this will kind of extend to commodities, equities, global trade partners, other industries rather than just DeFi, cryptocurrencies, and some of the other industries. So this is kind of our body of work. This is what Chainlink's working on today. And what you'll see is that we've emerged from focusing on aggregating financial market data, bringing that on-chain to extend the capabilities of smart contracts and what's possible with them to bring in kind of complex trust-minimized computation on-chain in the form of smart contract automation, randomly generated numbers for gaming use cases on-chain, and soon to be cross-chain communication. Now, as I mentioned, market data is the first category where we've achieved success in this, so much so that we today are securing, according to certain companies, 70% of DeFi through crypto price feeds, also FX rates, commodity pricing, and we're extending beyond that to new types of data and other types of trust-minimized computation. So a really cool example of this is weather data, and the unique position we're in at Chainlink is it's a kind of like chicken and egg situation where innovation is brought on both by data providers who are wanting to bring their own data sets on-chain, as well as developer communities who want to build certain applications and are requesting data for Chainlink Labs to go out and source and onboard these data providers. A great example of this is parametric insurance, where a variety of different weather data providers are bringing their data on-chain to ensure that insurance claims can be made by farmers when, say, there's a lack of rainfall or excess rainfall, maybe, and this is all executed on-chain. So there is no reliance or trust assumptions on third parties, no paper promises or reliance on like brand equity or reputation. Everything is kind of deterministically done on-chain, and the way in which this data is aggregated is in a decentralized fashion and brought on-chain. Another example for those interested in the NFT space is we're seeing, especially with the World Cup coming up at the back end of this year, a lot of NFT and gaming projects that are looking to bring in sports data, sports predictions markets. A really cool use case here is NFT collections, where sports data being brought on chain is enabling dynamic NFTs, where, say, a footballer scores a hat trick on the weekend, maybe his kit or the color of his boots or something changes color. Kind of interesting use cases like this. And there are obviously many other use cases for this type of data. So what has this led to? Well, it's led to an increase, a rapid increase, really, in the amount of data being published on chain and the amount of projects that are looking to leverage these solutions and aggregated data via Oracle networks. So much so that we eclipsed 3 billion data points delivered on chain May earlier this year. And what I suppose is even more interesting about this is, as I mentioned before, whilst market data and I suppose other types of data is an example of kind of early success with this, what we're seeing now is a movement to trust-minimized on-chain computation. So beyond just providing, I suppose, data on-chain, but also stuff like random number generation, like on-chain attestation of collateral backing certain assets. So Chainlink Proof of Reserves is another solution that's doing this for both wrapped assets. So we work with BitGo, for example, who, for those of you who are familiar, issue wrapped BTC on Ethereum. And what we're providing is consensus and cryptographic guarantees around the collateral that is backing these minted wrapped assets. We're also working with companies like Paxos, who have on-chain stablecoins for gold, and we're working to with off-chain auditors to basically be able to verify that they have sufficient physical gold backing these actual stablecoins on-chain, so that users have these guarantees and are not basically trusting based on brand reputation and paper promises. I suppose another key metric or key visual showing the success is the amount of projects that are embedding Chainlink solutions into their infrastructure. And this is highlighted in this graph here, where you can see that the number of GitHub repos that are referencing Chainlink services and baking in certain solutions like the ones I've mentioned is continuously going up. And lastly, I'm just going to finish up here. But what this is leading to is not just an expansion of the types of solutions and cryptographic guarantees that we're providing on chain, but also the types of data, the sorts of verticals that are being built out in the Web3 space, the types of companies and systems in the Web2 space that are looking to implement cryptographic guarantees as a standard to ensure that users have more transparency and more cryptographic guarantees around these trust-minimized applications. So hopefully what that's left you with today is some food for thought around the way in which oracles are providing value and enabling cryptographic guarantees and trust-minimized applications, and maybe spark some ideas around the ways in which projects that you're working on, whether in the Web2 or Web3 space, can leverage these sorts of solutions to provide these sorts of cryptographic guarantees as a new standard to your users and other folks in the space. Thank you very much.
So my name is Martin Saps. I am a program associate at Outlier Ventures. We are the Web3 accelerator building the new economic and social system, which we call the open metaverse. And that's really what I want to talk to you today. I was originally going to start this speech in Hebrew, didn't end up doing that. And it wasn't just because I wanted to show off my skill and be conceited. It was really because I wanted to tell you a few stories today. The two stories that I want to tell you today have to do with how Israel's culture of innovation presents a unique opportunity to drive this kind of more inclusive economy that we call Web3 and the open metaverse. So I'll start from the beginning. Like many people in Israel, I wasn't born in the same place where I grew up. I was born in Uruguay, and I moved to the US at a young age, where I grew up and learned how to speak with this accent, which still feels a little bit strange to me. And like many Israelis here, who will tell you that they're, a quarter Moroccan and 3/5 Bulgarian and had some great uncle who fought in the Turkish cavalry, the story of my life and growing up has largely been that of trying to find belonging in a new home while still retaining ties to the past. But I'll digress a bit. After graduating college, I, like many Americans of my background, found myself overeducated, and underemployable. So I did, unsure of my identity and unsure of my interests in this world, I did, something that a lot of great startup founders do, and which is that I moved to South Tel Aviv and I became a hipster. Still doing it, but I live in London now. But what I found here shaped and influenced my Web3 journey in a few key ways. First of all, living here taught me to be a lot more innovative. Like many or even most of us here who have read the book Startup Nation understand, we know that Israel's rapid success in the high-tech sector has everything to do with the culture of pushing boundaries and questioning authority. Now, what I didn't realize was how deeply this culture really was part of the fabric of society. And I'll give you an example. A few months after moving here, my first job was an internship on the editorial desk at the newspaper Haaretz. Now, at the newspaper, I was told that interns didn't typically pitch or publish articles for the newspaper. But at the same time, I was also told, like, Martin, tהיה חופר, try to push them and let you, write something, try to pitch an idea. And I came up with this idea based on some people that I knew who were Palestinians who were working in the Israeli high-tech sector. And I thought there was really scope to write an article there. And what I did find is that when I pitched that article, the editors of the newspaper really took me seriously. What I found was that even though I was the lowest person there at the newspaper, that there was a value placed on my voice. I found that there was really a value placed on the fact that somebody who had never published an article, was 22 years old, had recently moved here, was able to have something important to say. It's a culture that's especially unique to Israel, and I think really matches the Web3 space in general. The culture of leadership, yes, hierarchy, no. It's something that a lot of other companies, a lot of cultures, a lot of countries really struggle to adopt even if they try. And here, it really just comes naturally because it's part of the fabric and the culture of society. A culture that values challenging authority, pushing boundaries, and inclusion of thought is one that is bound to breed success. Now, the second thing that I want to talk about that I found here was a strong cultural and artistic scene, which gave me a community through which to understand where my skills lie. And I think this story is a lot more about Web3's potential more broadly to link culture, tech, and finance, to build a new economy and rewrite the rules of value where those rules of value are still being written. When I said I became a hipster here in South Tel Aviv, I mean that I immersed myself in the city's diverse and vibrant creative community. I made friends with artists and musicians, I played in bands, and I explored the city's architectural and cultural underground. And my experience in Tel Aviv, much like that in Web3, is that of discovering and building a community centered around cultural and creative innovation. And so, when I moved to London and landed in the same community, a scene where art and Web3 intersected, then I really was able to find a unique community that suited my interests, but allowed me to really have an impact and draw and find value where there was previously not. I found a DAO community of people starting an NFT gallery during the craze of 2021 and joined as one of the founders. I had some knowledge of Web3 before that, but that project was really what brought me into this space. And what I found was that vibrant cultural scene that I thought had really limited ability to generate capital was all of a sudden at the center of innovation. I found that cultural value had a price. Through community tokens or fine art NFTs, creatives were finding more avenues to earn money for their craft. And as I said before, because the rules of value capture in Web3 are still being written, there's a space given to grassroots communities. Essentially, and in sum, Web3 has the power to build a more rich, inclusive, and vibrant economy. And so, whether it's about innovation or community, the biggest lesson and learning that I gained here really came from the people that I met. Israel is a community of immigrants, myself included, and the diversity of people and viewpoints and cultures that exist here, that I encountered here, really pushed me to think beyond traditional systems of value. It really pushed me to think beyond traditional economic and social systems. It taught me to, even if at the time I didn't know it, it really taught me to be more Web3. And I think that that's really the common thread here. The common thread here is that Israel, much like Web3, is about two big things. One, it's about doing things differently. And two, it's about being united in a shared identity and goal. And I think that that really highlights that more broadly, we need to see Web3 not just as a technological and a financial system, we need to see it as a social and cultural system as well. One which can give value to a person, a group, or just an idea. And I think that that's really where a place like Israel, with a strong culture of building and working together to push what's possible, has really a potential to be at the center. Thank you.
So basically, we'd like to share, to have this opportunity to share, some of the questions that we're having, and people that ask us about, what happens in the industry, what are the opportunities, what are people building now, and I think that the part of this session, this panel, is to get to the people that are actually running blockchain-based businesses and investing in those, getting the real, I would say, essence out of what is happening in Web3 these days. With that, I'm very happy to have Yair, Nimrod, and Mark here with us. And maybe, just each of you should introduce yourself. And if you can tell us, what are you doing and what brought you into the Web3 space?
So, hello everyone. Super glad to be here. One of the reasons is that I'm going to start answering by your last question. By coincidence, I'm sitting here with the guys that first introduced me to crypto. Everyone in its own position.
There's no coincidence here,
There's no coincidence, actually. Yeah. It's, destiny in life. So my name is Yair Klepper. I'm bringing a techie knowledge. Was computer engineer, study computer engineering, and I'm building startups since I'm 21. In Lava, we're actually building decentralized infrastructure, RPC APIs built for scale. And that's one of the very first fundamental gaps that entering the crypto market last year. This is what we had identified. There is a huge gap between the promises in Web3 and what actually is being done today. And yeah, would love to elaborate on that later.
Hi, I'm Nimrod. I graduated here actually some 20-something years ago. So it's kind of a time loop. Started my way in crypto about 11, 12 years ago. Back then it was Bitcoin, then it became crypto, then it became DLT, then blah, 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 blah. Now it's Web3. So maybe worth putting a timeline of the naming conventions. Started Simplex in 2013, sold it about a year ago to a global payment company, investing in many crypto companies in the past few years. I think there are opportunities everywhere. It's still a very, very early phase of the industry. Literally everywhere you look, there is an opportunity both to make it better and to make money out of it. So I'm still a very big believer in the industry. I think in one of the first panels I joined, I think in 2013 or something, I was very, very certain and very certainly communicated that I think that crypto is going to be, at the time Bitcoin, is going to be mainstream in 5 to 10 years. Didn't age well. I don't think it's going to take 5 to 10 years from now. I think it's going to be longer. And I think there are, again, opportunities everywhere.
Hi, I'm Mark Smargon. So I'm in crypto for 9 years. First bought my first Bitcoin. It was $20. I bought one because I wanted a whole Bitcoin. That's like a psychological thing. And been in the space ever since. I started a Bitcoin broker here in Israel, then Kolu, which was a colored coins company. Some of you know, like the payment app in Tel Aviv. And today we're doing Fuse, which is a public blockchain ecosystem for consumers and businesses. And we believe in the future, blockchains are not going to be consumer-facing. The way we use blockchains now will not be, the way we will use them in the future. So this is what Fuse is pushing for.
Great. So I think that the subject of this panel is about market trends and about what we see about how the blockchain technology fits different market trends and what's happening there. And I think that's basically my question. So what do you see as the main trends that are happening now in blockchain, And maybe as opposing to what happened like a few years ago, and we can talk about this a little bit later. But do you see like there are lots of infrastructures being built? You're talking about that and others. What is it built for? What are the real main trends that will take blockchain from its like island, the crypto space, to the real full industry as we saw it before?
Well, I feel that the financial system was mostly built before the internet, and it's mostly built in layers. Mm-hmm. And right now, crypto is kind of trying to rebuild it, and it feels like Wild West right now. But it's also been built like bottom up, layer by layer, and I definitely think that a technology that people talk about is usually means that it's premature. Usually when it's like mature, it's not sexy, it's not interesting anymore. Nobody talks about what database Google uses, right? So there's still a lot of speculation around the tech. That means it's still not there yet. So I really see like another layer being added each year. Can go into specifics, but that's like on a high level.
Just as a follow-on, so the layers are for a financial system. Do you see like Web3 as mostly a financial play?
I think if you go to as a traditional VC and ask if Facebook is a Web3 company, they will tell you yes. Okay. And when analysts look at the Web3 space, they put a lot of things in there. They put, all of the crypto space, including all of the gaming space. So we can talk about what we mean when we say Web3. I have a very specific thought, but definitely something that came up like during the last few years of the crypto hype.
I think that at the end of the day, I mean, there are two main narratives that you need to examine, I think, if you're planning on starting something new in this space. One is the long-term view of the world, which I think that at the end everything will be metaverse connected somehow. And the second one is the market cycles. So even if you're planning for something that will be highly usable for everyone in a decade, still you have to consider the market cycles, which are just becoming more and more aggressive. More aggressive, I wouldn't say more frequent, but more users each time, more people losing their money, more people making money, more people jumping in, more companies jumping in, more investors jumping in. I think, by the way, if you consider cycles and development cycles, I think now is the perfect time to start a business in Web3. Because by the time the next cycle hits, and again, there'll be a flood of users and money into the ecosystem, you'll be perfectly positioned with the product instead of, joining the hype of people just raising money and starting to develop for the ecosystem at that point, when you'll be just ready with your product when the next market crash comes, and that sucks.
But still, it's quite aggressive to say that on the high horizon, everything will be metaverse-based and decentralized.
Yeah, I think that's the way it's going to happen. I mean, I can elaborate if you have you want to guide me with a question, like how do you object it?
I think, many are actually saying that, decentralization is not really a must for every project or for every use case. And,
no, not for every use case for sure, but there are many use cases that the reason I got interested in the beginning in Bitcoin is because the current financial systems are completely fucked up. Yep. It's a trickle-up economy. It's like slavery with extra steps, as in Rick and Morty. And there's an alternative of a completely separate financial system, which is transparent, more more fair. I'm not a libertarian. I don't think everything should be destroyed and start again from the ground up. But there is, think of it, and again, the example I always give is voice over IP over copper wire. The reason the telcos became so big globally is because they were charging you copper wire prices for a decade after they were working over voice over IP. I remember when I was a student here, I was paying a phone bill of something like $1,500 a month. Now it's like, I don't know, $5, $10.
You're paying for the Ethernet gas fees, but that's a different question, right?
Fine,
Yeah.
fair point. Scalability takes time. But I do think that at the end of the day, one of the reasons that identity wars, for example, between Facebook Connect, Google ID, probably Microsoft had something at the time as well. It didn't work because it always belonged to someone, and there was always another gigantic company fighting against it because they wanted to own it. And if you have a decentralized system, nobody has to own it. Consider maybe there will be because I'm involved in a few platform where there are full identity information with KYC attestation, online, decentralized, accessible to law enforcement when needed. It's much better than Google having your identity. Yeah. So I think in many cases, it's amazing to have a decentralized, fair system. Not everything needs it. We saw it in the previous ICO boom. Not every idea with blockchain is amazing. Nobody needs it if you don't need decentralization.
So maybe Yair, if you want to relate to that, and since Nimrod talked about the ICO, so the trends that we're seeing now are different than what we saw in 2017, right? That was the last peak before. Now like 6 months ago. But basically, if we see different kind of companies and different kind of trends that are coming now, that people are focused on, than they focused, 5 years ago, which is the same market, same panel like 5 years ago, you would say the same thing. The world will be like, very decentralized. Why should the banks hold these fees and everything? The copper and the telecom. Yeah, it's still, we passed 5 years, but it seems that the type of startups, type of companies that were built now are very different than what was 5 years ago. So if you can relate to that, well, I think it would be very interesting, including yourself, right? Things that you.
Yeah, I think I'm in a very interesting timing to enter the industry. I'm the least experienced from everyone who sits right here, especially about Web3, but because we heard everything that happened in the last few months, the bear market, I'm getting a lot of questions, but crypto is dead. So I'm showing them exactly the bubble burst of the internet, an article from 2001, right after the bubble.com burst, and saying them that the headline in the New York Times was millions are about to leave the internet, and say, yeah, everyone left the internet, right? So thinking about that, there is a lot of input things that I personally identify in Web3 and what brought me here. One of them is the power of, and it relates a bit to what Nimrod said before, one of them is the power of community. And I think that when you're looking at all the biggest protocol out there, TCP, IP, HTTP, they are standard today, but nobody is able or was able to own them. And this is the first time, the first industry that you see you can contribute as a community. You can take it, and this is the real meaning and the full potential of open source. You're able to be part of a community, part of owning the protocols, and make it much more significant. When I first heard about Web3, I thought that definitely many applications are not going to be decentralized. And what we do here in Lava, we always said at the beginning, Lava is not about, decentralization is not the goal. Decentralization is the key to arrive to a much better scalable infrastructure, much better trustable infrastructure. And in open source, verifiability is one of the key messages there.
Just one thing to add, I think that the 2017, like the biggest difference to then 2017 is I think there was bigger dichotomy between centralized and decentralized. It was like farther away. It was like basically two flavors, fully centralized, fully decentralized. And now you see more, people talk about trust minimized, not zero trust. Like in the Chainlink presentation, you understand that there's still some trust to the system. People want to give trust. They don't want to be their own bank. That's not necessarily a consumer demand to be your own bank. So today's startups starting to understand, okay, there's some stuff that Bitcoin is not good for. And I think it's more on the philosophical level, like how should we trust our institutions, not necessarily that we don't need to trust them. And I think that today's startups, are much more evolved in thinking how do we make money from this, because it's also a big question when everything's open source. Where's the value? Like how do you create value? This is also a question early internet companies had, like how do we make money? So I think this is today's trend, but definitely. It's proven that decentralization is good for some stuff. A lot of stuff, not necessarily for everything, but for I think that validation period, we're past that.
I think that we see today that decentralization comes with a lot of performance and cost associated with. I think over time, the more we will have a better infrastructure for that, right? The more we can build real decentralized solutions. I think that's what we see today, more infrastructure being built in order to support such use cases. But as a let's call it a Web2 guy, I know that like on the internet we have the front end, the back end, the databases, and that's what composes almost every application today. And it seems like that we talk a lot about blockchain, and we call it Web3, but basically it's taking the database out, putting like an open source data infrastructure in, and thinking that we've changed all the world and all the use cases and everything has changed. Do you see that? Okay, Nimrod is already
Nimrod is already ready to fight.
I'm waiting for Nimrod to be more provocative.
That's a very Web2 approach to things. If you think that, and I had this discussion, I think it was 11 years ago with a CTO of BNY Mellon. I came to Israel, and I was pitching Bitcoin and decentralization and everything. He said, yeah, but I can do the same thing on the MySQL server in my cellar. Mm-hmm. The whole point is not a different database mechanism, because of course it has performance issues if you compare it to that. But the point is a completely different approach. It's not supposed to just substitute your database. Nobody needs that. And there's no cloud, it's just somebody else's computer. But the point is that you enable decentralization and transparency where it's needed. It's not, again, and I think that one of the biggest differences between this market cycle and the previous one, which you mentioned, is that in ICO season in 2016, it was like, I want to do, this with blockchain. I want to do a classroom with blockchain. I want to do construction work with blockchain. Nobody needs this shit. Wherever you need decentralization, and as you mentioned, open source.
Maybe more of the trustless model, more than
let's say, not even, as Mark said, not necessarily trustless, but
yes.
An opportunity for not 100% trust in your bank.
Okay.
I still want the bank to, to safeguard my funds. I just want to be able to maybe control it as well and not ask for approval for every transaction. Maybe I want to see transparency, the fractional reserve ratio of the bank, and maybe model something around that. Again, it's a evolution of the technology and the approach towards it, rather than just either centralized or decentralized, as Mark said.
And also, I think there's unsolved problems that people are not realizing in the internet, like not only in the financial system. I think, for instance, exactly what I wanted to say. So DNS, VPNs, people use CDNs, usually, DDoS prevention, for instance, things like that. Usually people pay insane amounts of money to one single player. There's no real solution except decentralization for those problems, everything I mentioned. So Web3 for me is a business model where instead of paying AWS, you're paying a public decentralized network when it makes sense. And also I think last year we had the NFT boom, so we have like a lot of verticals like fashion and music and sports and art, and they also try to figure out how to make money, so it's really the commonality here is let's find new business models. That's real innovation. Not necessarily let's push for decentralization. It's really just let's fix what's not working, because there's a lot of things that don't work, like when we scale exponentially into a digital world.
So basically, we've changed to a decentralized model, and we changed to a way that there's like a co-ownership of the computation, basically. And instead of paying a bank, you're paying the people who run the bank, which is the community, basically. In essence. Spectrum. The spectrum, yeah. It's a wider. Let's just go into, since we want to talk about where the developers are, because we don't see the developers. We would assume that there would be much more developers coming into Web3, but overall we see, we have like tens of millions of developers doing Web2 stuff, and we are seeing that it's growing quite nicely, the whole area of Web3 and Solidity developers and others, but we're still in a very small numbers, in the 100, 200,000 people like worldwide. At least that's.
I'm not sure I agree with that. Again, I might be inside the eye of the storm, but as far as I know, I've heard of tons of developers leaving the large companies, Facebook, Google, everything, and starting Web3 companies. So as far as I know, there's a huge shift from Web2 developers to Web3 developers, because they can see and there's a huge affinity for developers in crypto making money by being developers without marketing, without sales, without anything. Just like the fact that you can code your way to a shit ton of money is very appealing, I think.
I think it's a great example about how you started a startup when the beginning of the 2000, and you needed to create your own technology, raise your own money, and get out there, right? But this time with Web3, every techie guy can come up with his own protocol, can finance that by the community, can find other developers bringing more incentives in and creating community around token incentivization. This is very unique. That was super appealing to us. I see the growth we have in Lava by bringing a lot of experts, super sharp core team engineers from Web2 to Web3. I think we're only on the tip of the iceberg in terms of what's unlocking the full potential. And you see great projects contributed by great code, documentation, cosmotability. It's something that you're building it like a Lego, so everyone can contribute. You don't need to accept to get hired by Google or Facebook in order to help the code. And the thing here is verifiability. So as Bitcoin said, don't trust, verify.
Mark, if you want, yeah.
Just want to add that there's about 30 to 40 million crypto users in the world. So you can't really have more developers than that. There's like a limited pool of people that understand what's going on. I don't think crypto is mature enough for like mainstream developers. And they wouldn't understand what to do with it, like with RPC nodes and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think what the model is referring to, that there's a lot of projects, a lot of, let's call it entrepreneurs or people that are building new things, new projects, and as Yair said, that can get the community, help them to build these projects. But overall, the number of developers is still limited. The tools are still very limited. The developer tools, the ecosystem, what you can build with, the stack of solutions that you have to build something is so limited. You're back in the 2000s where you still did like assembly and then C programming.
And again, that's why there are so many opportunities here.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. But still, I think that
$1 trillion industry is unlocking the.
Yeah, so I think that's.
And also, there's the inherent bigger cost for bugs.
Yeah.
Because you're actually losing money on them.
Also, all the developers that were early made money and left. That's also a problem,
We return. So maybe just to close this panel, I think if you talk to Web3 people, that we say, we're in different industry. The Web2 guys, the Googles of the world, the Amazon, whatever, will never get there. This is not a play of a centralized, companies that are owning everything. It's more of a community and about projects to get a lot of acceptance from the industry. But let's go like 10 years from now. Do you see, the current companies that are being built to be the next Googles and Microsoft and all of the big guys, or do you see being fairly successful, but then getting these giants getting into the game as they knew how to get into, in many of the market shifts before.
I think just like in any large evolution step in the market, look at the internet. Many companies were smart enough to step in at the right moment. Many weren't, and they're gone. I'll quote something a friend of mine once told to I think it was the Kodak board.
The what?
The Kodak.
Kodak, yeah.
Whoever remembers them.
Yeah.
So he said you can, move forward and adapt to the market or die. Nobody's forcing you to adapt. So.
No, I think that the companies of the future will probably have different business models than advertising. Like the big companies, and also those business models don't exist yet. That's the only thing that I'm sure of. I do think that a big part of the attraction to this technology is the belief that 100 years from now there's a bigger chance you'll have Bitcoin than Facebook, right? So that's really why I see this technology as being very anti-fragile, even if it's not Bitcoin necessarily and doesn't trust. Now, Bitcoin will always be like the rock, the anchor, but people are not actively looking to buy gold, so let's see how people will treat Bitcoin 100 years from now. But the fact that that something will exist 100 years from now is valuable. You don't have a lot of things you trust like that.
Here?
Some words that I exposed first time entering the market is public good, and I think that's what we're shifting into. The world is shifting into public good that everyone is able to access and, as mentioned before, own. So I see that during the next years, there's going to be a lot of important milestones in the industry, a lot of governments that need to be taken care, and in general, government and regulation and stuff like that needs to know and implement procedures, how to work with such projects, and how to make sure that anti-money laundering and stuff like that are being regulated, but in a total correspondence with the projects in crypto.
Yeah. So I think it would be more provocative here because usually when you talk to Web3 people, they say that these the models are very different. Like in Web3, the ownership is the users are basically the owners and not companies, and that's a little more difficult. But I think time will say, time will tell, and I think that I think we're very excited about what's happening in the market, the level of maturity of the entrepreneurs, the projects, and I think the industry is also getting into adopting blockchain type of technologies into real businesses, and I think that will basically grow the entire opportunity set in industries.
And one of the fundamentals should be Israel, obviously, and that we are the startup nation, but let's be the startup nation for crypto also.
Yeah, I think in Israel we always start a little bit later, but then accelerate very fast, and I think that's where we are today. And
we need you guys from
we have a panel discussion later with the VCs, and let's see what
I think Israelis joined the ecosystem very early. I remember a conference in Amsterdam in 2013, 150 people from the entire world, 15 from Israel.
Yeah.
And someone asked me, how come there are so many Israelis here? I told him, it's technological, it's controversial, and it's money.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. I think with that, I think we'll have to close now. So thanks for this discussion. I think it's very interesting. Thank
you. Thank you very much for joining us. Actually, this is a very, very good segue panel from the first panel because we're going to talk about business models. And Mark did just a great job saying that that's the only important thing to talk about. So we have a great panel. I'm going to let each one of our distinguished guests please present themselves please briefly, because we're a bit off schedule. So who are you, what do you do, and let's jump right into it.
Hi, my name is Yoni. I'm Coty's Chief Innovation Officer. I've been in crypto since 2017, and I've been in TradeFi in the last 15 years. Worked for Bank Mizrahi in risk management, and my focus in the last 2 years has been on DeFi. And we have built in Coty CVI, which is a crypto volatility index. It's like a VIX for crypto, and living and breathing DeFi 24/7 for the last 2 years.
Hi everybody, my name is Daniel Keys. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Sapana. We're building a decentralized search engine for blockchains and crypto. There's a ton of data coming online, and as many of you probably know, it's really a terrible experience to search and discover content. I'm also super excited to be at a Web3 Summit in Israel because I often think of Israel as a DAO. Nobody really knows who's in charge, and it's impossible to make decisions. So hopefully we can change that a little bit.
Hey, I'm Ortal Taval. I'm leading Kolu today. And Kolu has been pioneering city coins for the last 6 years. We have success stories in cities like Boston and San Mateo County that really demonstrate how city coins can drive economic and social prosperity. And now we are a core contributor to the Urban Change Protocol, a protocol, of course, on the blockchain that enables any urban community in the world to have their own local coins. And using the local coins, they can encourage the residents to take action that will benefit the community, actions such as shopping locally, supporting diversity, promoting sustainability, and so on.
Cool, my name's Itai. I'm with Market Across. We are a PR and marketing agency based in Tel Aviv, and I'm also part of the first Pitango DAO. All right, cool. Let's go straight into it. I was going to ask, what is Web3, how do we, whatever, but let's move forward. We just had half an hour of that. So business models. It's all about new business models. Let's start with like the main question. What unique business models are you seeing in Web3 that excite you, that you think that are groundbreaking?
Yeah, so as my focus is on DeFi, I'm very excited about what's going on with DeFi right now. We've seen a lot of hype around it in previous years, and now we finally reached the mature stage in which protocols are not relying on inflation, on Ponzinomics, tokenomics elements, and are actually bringing real value to users and are actually generating cash flow for their tokens. And it's very exciting that we're now in this mature stage, that protocols are really bringing the actual value, are beginning to be very similar to how businesses operate in the real world. So it's very exciting to see that right now reaching maturity. We're seeing a lot of applications such as we have GMX on Arbitrum, Gains Network, a lot of protocols that are generating fees that you can even see. You can track it. There's a site called Crypto Fees. You can see that they are in the top charts, generating more fees than their ones and gaining a lot of real users. And this is probably just the beginning, because even at this phase, we're seeing these protocols are still below 5% of all of trading in crypto. So there is a lot of room for that to grow and bring value for also users that would like to use DeFi.
We're going to touch on that because there is a caveat that most of the people that used DeFi in the past year did not get value, they got wrecked. So we have to still address that part, which is, DeFi is for sure a very, very interesting use case, of course, for Web3. Whoever doesn't know, DeFi is decentralized finance, meaning that any person or group of people can set a protocol, say there's value to it, get people to contribute to it.
To me, some of the most interesting things are happening are actually not in DeFi, but in the social space. So finance is very important, but so are the digital lives that we live. And I think today, more than ever, people's digital lives are often more important than their physical lives. We spend more times on screen than off time. Blue check mark means more than a new car to many new people. So we're seeing really innovative experiments in bringing our online lives away from platforms like Facebook and Twitter that have full ownership over the content you create, and into protocols where every single person can help define how the system works, and they can be part owners, and they can directly monetize their content. So, you know, I know of people who have made millions of dollars this past year by posting content on social networks. That's something that you don't get natively in Facebook or Twitter.
I totally agree, and also to say that for me, a business model is kind of a DAO. A DAO is a community that incentivizes its members with a token. And DAOs essentially enable anyone in Web3 to become a combination of entrepreneur, investor, freelancer, and a board member. So once you contribute to the community, to the DAO, you're incentivized with a token. With a token, you can take part in decision making and really enjoy the success of this community. And I think this is the amazing thing in Web3.
Cool. So actually, I want to touch exactly on that. A lot of people ask me, what's, you know, the community? It's all about the community. But there isn't a problem inherently in crypto assets that your community has an asset that has a price. So the users of Google or Gmail most likely won't be aggravated if, if the stock of Google goes down or up. Isn't there an inherent problem with all this great, community concept in Web3, where it all just kind of becomes us financial speculators on this asset? And I always say this NFT project, I'm not super bullish on NFTs, that I always say that your community is as good as your floor price. Isn't there an inherent issue where your community becomes a vested financial interest because it can also, as I said, go down? What do you think about that part of Web3? Isn't there a problem in that business model where your users are also in asset holders that are affected by the price?
Yeah, so also this was mentioned in the previous panel. Everything right now in Web3 is basically a work in progress. It's still evolving. So as you mentioned, DeFi has a lot of pros, a lot of caveats, have to be careful. Also DAOs. DAOs are great, but we're seeing a lot of problems with that. How do you manage and reach consensus in which you have many different users that have different ability to impact the protocol and they have their own interest? So this is something that is still being worked on, and we're seeing DAOs being shaped, and it's, in my opinion, it's an evolution. We'll see DAOs being evolved and becoming more efficient.
I think you're right. It is an inherent problem, but I'm not sure what the alternative is. I mean, we have the same thing in democracy where we can elect bad leaders. So I think it's up to us to build the tools that help, protect against downsides and to give individuals the option to buy in and participate in the networks they want to and be kind of as influential as they choose to be.
Yes, agree again. We think about this issue every day when we think about urban change in communities, right? When you put a price to your token in the community, will it make it worth less, right? So it's something to think about and to experiment with and to evolve and to see where it goes. But definitely the other options are not so good. So we should find solutions for this one.
Perfect. All right. Great. So let's talk about, again, I think you touched about this DAOs in DeFi, whatever, types of tokens. So again, tokens are usually the basis of, I would say, Web3 economies. So 2017 round, again, post Ethereum, almost everything was what's called utility tokens, meaning I would build a system. I think the best way of looking at a potential utility token is airlines. I'd be an airline, I'd say I only have a certain amount of mileage, maybe you should stack up on this mileage. That was a kind of a first model. We saw that didn't really work out because the dApps themselves didn't have users, so no one needs this mileage. Then there was a pretty interesting push for security tokens, as in, all right, let's do this thing, but as a securitized way or whatever. That had zero adoption, or almost no adoption. Then we're looking now at governance tokens, a lot about like DAOs. So your token is a format of vote for a certain, maybe there's a treasury involved or whatever. There's non-fungible tokens. So are we just shooting out ideas? Does any of these really work? Is one stick better than the other? What's the next one? You guys are working on something new. Just trying to kind of elaborate. What do you think? Because we've passed through 4 or 5 models that all were the go-to solution for 6 months, and 6 months later, no one wants to do it anymore. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's relates a bit to what I mentioned earlier. So, and what you also said, that we had in DeFi a large hype and a lot of people got wrecked, and because the tokens didn't have real users and also didn't have real value accrual. So how do you value a token? And now what we're seeing is the beginning of a very mature stage. As you said, everyone should be careful about this. There are a lot of caveats, but the industry is moving forward, and what I do see going forward is similar to how the actual world operates, in which you have companies and they generate cash flow for their holders. I do see it in combination with governance and DAOs. It has to go together. So governance tokens that generate cash flow, I see something very big going forward.
Yeah, I don't think we're ever going to find one token model that supports every use case. So I think it's good that we have all these experiments in different places, and I think as we see more token models come out, they do take good parts from those that came before. So I think we're going to continue to see that. I also I'm going to go back to social, because I think a lot of the interesting token models are happening there, and we have things like soul-bound tokens or identity tokens that aggregate traits about you that
non-transferable. So NFTs
yeah.
Actually show that I went to Harvard when I can't sell to someone else.
Yeah, exactly. But it's kind of public on a ledger where you have ownership over that, and you have portability, so you can take your followers from Twitter and bring them to your decentralized social network or what may be. So. That's an area that I think is going to continue evolving over the next few years, and I also think the bear market is a really good time to work on that, because you're not distracted by 50,000% APYs, and you can kind of go back to the wacky parts of the internet that made it really fun in the beginning, and and build off that.
Well, I'm biased, but definitely it's local coins. This is the future. If you think about it, the primary community that we all choose, right, is where we live, where we build our home. And it's definitely time to connect our home, where we live, the neighborhood, the city, the daily actions that we do, to the digital world and to the blockchain.
All right, cool. So let's talk about dApps. I think we talked about that. dApps are decentralized apps. One of the biggest things that we all wanted to do in 2017. Nimrod touched that. I want to run a decentralized Uber, or I want to decentralize Google. A lot of that failed, and I think a lot of people said, well, there wasn't enough infrastructure, not enough people were in the game. Do you think that, again, all of you guys are running dApps of certain sorts? Is there a future where, like, are dApps going to win? Is that or can we even survive without dApps? Can we just build more and more infrastructure and wait for the dApps to come? What are your thoughts about that?
I think as mentioned also before, regards of Web3, so it also has the ability of ownership, decentralized ownership. So you have decentralized ownership of items and digital assets like NFTs, and you have decentralized ownership of applications. So those are dApps, and there is a lot of evolution in that. So we have decentralized autonomous organizations controlling that. It's currently in evolution and constantly evolving, and also there is a need to regulate that, right? So the DAOs and dApps have to adjust to regulation, have to prevent money laundering. So there are a lot of challenges, and I think it's important to remember the context. This is still a work in progress. We still have several years ahead of us as this infrastructure is being built.
I don't really think we should hold our breath for the killer app. I don't think that's how it's going to work. Web3 is kind of like trying to build the internet on top of the internet. So we're competing against the best applications and user interfaces and UXs that have ever been built or designed. And there's a ton of variance on the internet. So anything we do can swing really far in either direction. But there are tens of millions of people onboarded to Web3, and I think if you viewed Web3 as a startup, the metrics would be off the chart of recurring customers and screen time and how often they're engaging with different protocols. So we just have to take a view that it's spread across many different chains and dApps, as opposed to having one Facebook or one Google. We're trying to prevent that.
I'll follow up for that, and I'll go a second. So we have seen certain dApps that had, I would say, a few months of usage, but then their internal economy crashed. So that would be Axie Infinity, that worked for about 2 months. There was StepIn. There's a great meme walking around that someone said, I bought StepIn is a move to earn. It was an app that was giving you tokens to walk around. So someone said that he bought the tokens 3 months ago. Now they went down and he needs to walk every day for 6 hours for 7 years to get his money back. So even when the dApps work, then we see that dApps meeting token economics, meeting people's want to speculate and make money, there's a crash there. And again, I don't want to be so negative. Crypto's my life. I love it. I work in it. But there's a problem that every time we do see a dApp get into mass adoption, then the economy crashes. Not all of them. Uniswaps did, one didn't. But like, how are you guys in the business that you're building that, stress testing that, seeing what happens when you actually do get a big user surge? How is not very fast turned into a fall? Because we have seen a few of those in crypto.
Yeah, so when a token is not is relying the dApps that you mentioned relies on basically Ponzinomics, token incentives over token incentives over new users coming in and generating new value for the old users that are exiting. So that is part of what creates the problem. And when you have a pragmatic approach that is more similar to the real world, that there is a certain way to value.
Then they don't come. It's just an application that's in the real world. If you don't have a big incentivization, they don't come.
That's something that is related to the world we're in. I think it's important to remember it's still a work in progress. This is very evident because like even next week we have the biggest change in crypto in the last 5 years. Ethereum, which is one of the biggest networks, is going to. Yeah, so next week Ethereum is going to transition to its new version. It's changing its consensus algorithm from proof of work to proof of stake. This is a huge change. This network holds billions, hundreds of billions of dollars of value in DeFi, and this is happening next week. So this just emphasizes where we're in. Realistically, this is a work in progress. We're still in all these stages. When you hear from people, friends, what's happening in crypto, how didn't Bitcoin reach mass adoption? It's early days. There are still several years ahead of us.
I'd love to hear from the quote, like, how do you guys address like what happens if a certain city coin now moves 10,000%? How do we make that sustainable?
Well, at first we think that you don't need to make a lot of promises. I mean, the coin is not for making money. I meet all kind of entrepreneurs that say, I want to have a local coin in my city, and when I talk with them about their goals, what they want to achieve, if I see that they talk about, I want to earn money from this token, then I'm telling them, this is not the purpose of the coin. Okay, if you want to trade coins, go somewhere else. So we need to understand that when we talk about dApps, we should talk about the value for the users in all kinds of processes in life, but not necessarily just money and trading. And usually today, that's what people talk about in the crypto world. So that's the change.
Expectation management.
Just to add to that, I do think that the protocols and dApps that we've seen that have been the most sustainable are those that provide a platform which with on top other things can be built. So we're circumventing that by building a search infrastructure that every dApp and protocol in Web3 can integrate and then have a embedded and dedicated search engine for their content. So I think by focusing on how...
Even the dApps have to be infrastructure. They have to be ready to become, not I would say layer ones, but like have to be integrated into other apps.
I think that's one way to try to be as sustainable and as long-term as possible, because otherwise you're chasing KPIs that fluctuate a lot with market prices.
All right, cool. So last question, because we do have to do it quickly. Let's talk about DeFi. Seemed like the coolest use case for a long time. Again, I was super bullish and still super active about DeFi, but we can't not talk about the recent turn of events. Now again, the whole market did crash, but all these different organizations that maybe you're smart enough, but most people aren't smart enough to understand how they're built and where they're based and how the functions work. Most of DeFi crashed. I'm talking about like centralized DeFis like Celsius, or really not centralized DeFis. And what has the DeFi space learned from the past 6 months that you're like, all right, DeFi 2.0, 3.0, whatever, is going to be different because?
Yeah, so you mentioned basically centralized DeFi. So I would say that there is a key distinction between DeFi and centralized DeFi, and we've exactly seen that in recent months with what happened with Celsius. And we've seen basically entities that are crashing and could not meet their obligations. Yeah, Luna is also, that's correct, it's a type of risk inherent in DeFi, that's correct. And regarding Celsius, that's the difference between DeFi and centralized DeFi. The DeFi operated in those times, it worked. Even with the Luna crash, the most DeFi markets, they survived this and they passed it. And versus Celsius and like that are not regulated and basically could not meet their obligations.
I'm going to have to follow up on that. I have maybe a different view. I feel like all DeFi is now contracts that need to be stress tested. And actually, I think me and Ayad had to talk about that. And I said, what we're seeing now is all these cool people built all this code. Now a lot of people that might be smarter and might have a lot more money are saying, this is game theory. We just need to understand how much money I need to move that little part on that protocol that is overinflated there or whatever. And then I create these huge effects. Or just the amount of leverage that happened. You were seeing organizations or protocols giving triple leverage. Like, what did we learn? Like, what are you now, someone working with DeFi saying, oh wow, that in that structure of Luna, like that really was a big problem, whatever. Like, how can the people here that are interested in DeFi, because most of the people right now, they're gonna say, oh, don't do DeFi, it's not good right now, it's a bad time, you should go into something else. If the next round of people doing DeFi, what should they be doing to do a better DeFi?
Yeah, I think first of all, yeah, as you said, it's like a stress test, and it's a work in progress. DeFi learns from every aspect of this, and it will learn from what happened with the Luna event. I see it as an evolution. It's a stage that it's early adoption. It has a lot of risk, a lot of entailed risk, and I do see it evolving. And I do see the key distinction between DeFi and centralized DeFi. And in that aspect, DeFi worked because you have transparency. You can see what
I can see myself losing the money.
You can see the assets that are backed or not backed, as long as the overall infrastructure is working. That unlike Luna.
Just any remarks about DeFi? What we've learned, what we can change before we close up?
Yeah. So I think DeFi can't fix everything, right? There are still humans in the mix, and humans have a tendency for greed and wanting more than maybe what the protocol will allow, and bending rules this way and that way. But I think, as you said, the fundamentals, the code, the networks stayed strong, and I think we need DeFi and we need independent money more than ever. I mean, we're seeing bank accounts of normal citizens frozen for their political opinions. People are getting kicked off, the digital town square for an agenda that the people in power might not like. So I think now more than ever we need these tools, and we need smart people to consciously interact with them.
We're done? All right, perfect. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks everyone for joining our panel. This time we'll try to cover the investor angle and provide some perspective from long-term investors in the space on the recent trends and kind of the mentality around how investments are being done in Web3. Perhaps let's start with a quick intro. Martin?
Sure. I'm Martin. I work for Outlier Ventures, and we are a Web3 accelerator.
Hi, Shelly Hodmoyan, founding partner at iAngels, VC and crypto investor.
Hi, I'm Adam. I'm the founding partner of Outlier Ventures, which is a Web3 native VC fund.
So perhaps let's start, just talking about kind of the nature of investments in Web3 in general. We've seen very different models of funding, both in terms of the type of asset as well as kind of the way that investors are addressing different rounds or investment in startups. What do you find as kind of the successful or the right model for investing in this space, and do you think will converge into kind of a more traditional model going forward?
I'll take a crack at this one. So first of all, there are a lot of similarities between investing in Web3 startups and regular startups. You're looking for great teams, great ideas, a product with a use case, with a market that wants it. You're looking to solve some pains. The biggest difference is really the liquid nature of some of these investments, and the fact that rather than trying to build equity, you're really trying to build a network, you're trying to build an economy. And when you kind of take these two worlds and you're a VC or you're investing in startups in the space, you just need to also take into consideration the capital markets nature of some of these investments.
Someone said, I think in the earlier panel, that this is a work in progress, and I agree with that. In 2017, we've seen a lot of SAFT, and then we kind of moved away from the SAFT at some point. I think today, at least from our perspective, what we're trying to do is we're trying to tell the startups that are going to do a token, try to avoid launching the token in the beginning, build a startup, a regular startup, get to product market fit, build something that has value, get a community around you, and then at the end, if you still think you need a token, then launch the token, which is why today we do a safe and then a warrant for tokens. And the warrant is just an option to exercise the ability to get the tokens, but it might be that at the end of the day, after 3 or 4 years, we find out that from a regulatory perspective or anything else, we don't need a token, and that's completely fine to be an equity-based company. And that basically kind of neutralizes the whole thing that Shelly just mentioned, because you don't want to be a startup and a public company. That's crazy.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think really echoing what was already said, I think the big difference is exactly what Shelly said, that there's investments are generally more liquid. And so, on one hand, that, is favorable because it's easy to kind of go for a kind of quicker exit. On the flip side, and this goes exactly what you were saying with, publicly launched tokens, that there is a lot more volatility in it just by the nature of what it is. And then the other thing to speak about, which might be more relevant to talk about later, is just the general regulation or lack thereof, where I think people are trying to create and apply blanket rules where there aren't any, and they're more or less fitting to the nature of how the space and the liquidity works itself.
We're seeing more and more capital flowing into investing in Web3 and crypto in general. Do you see that becoming mainstream, or still, like, you're seeing a lot of investors are still kind of on the fence, or even kind of revolting the reality of Web3 becoming a real economy by itself?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting thing to think about, particularly because Web3, as we all know, is a very broad area that incorporates anything from DAOs to NFTs to really just like traditional finance companies that might use or touch the blockchain in some way. So I think that that's really the way in which more traditional investors will and are slowly coming into the space, is through investing in companies that are more at the infrastructural level, or more traditional companies that are kind of starting to come and use the blockchain in this way. That's why at OV, when we talk to investors, all investors say, we're looking for infrastructure projects. And I think that that's because infrastructure projects, are generally seen as not necessarily lower risk, but more broadly applicable. They're seen as such that, even if this individual thing doesn't take off, and we've seen a lot of things in crypto hyped up as the next big thing and then, not becoming the next big thing. The infrastructure for them might be applied to something else, and that's something that's really valuable, and I think that that's really the path.
I would probably separate the investor into three buckets, kind of overgeneralize. The first one are basically people who are making investment in Web3, and they have the motivation, they have a thesis, they strongly believe in the future, and sometimes they are like solely investing just in Web3. And they are the investor who are dabbling into Web3, but mostly because they don't have a, they have a thesis, but I think the motivation is mostly, there's a lot of hype, people are doing it, they're smart, I should do it too. And then in the process, they're becoming maybe, they're turning into the first bucket. I've seen a lot of them turning into this. But it's also, it's a double-edged sword because you could make a couple of wrong investment because you don't have a good thesis and then buy at the top, and then you'll become like a crypto hater. And then the third one is people who have no, they'll say, I don't know what's going on in Web3. I like to focus, I don't have a thesis, I'll just wait and see what's going to happen. And there are a lot of investors everywhere, and it's moving more and more toward the first bucket.
One important element for all of us as investors is, of course, kind of timing. Timing is a key important, especially in a market that is evolving. What is your view on kind of the timing that we're at in terms of kind of the maturity and life cycle and depending on specific even applications within the space?
So first of all, timing also depends on your time horizon as an investor. So if you have a long time horizon, then the timing is always right. I think specifically when you're in a bear market or when there's a lot of uncertainty and fear, traditionally this is the very best time to invest. The valuations are lower, there's less competition over deals, there are much less founders, there's much more time to do due diligence. So whenever the investment is most painful and there's the most amount of fear, these are really the best times to invest and build. I think, kind of back to your point, it's still an early industry. It's still an early industry. We're still at the phase where we're building out infrastructure, but infrastructure is already much more advanced and much more mature than when it was back in 2017, 2018. So it's actually not a bad time to start looking at applications and at the application level. And I know that's what I'm already thinking about. When you think about kind of the iPhone and what it did to the world and the ecosystem that was built on top of that infrastructure, that's what excites me the most about Web3, and that's what's going to bring the adoption.
I think timing is also, first of all, you have to understand, where you are in the history, and where do you want to get, or what's the end goal? Timing to what? To a billion user or something like that. And to me, I think the thing that I see a lot is when I talk to people or investors, they tell me, look, it took a long time from the first web page in '91 all the way to now, and it's basically they take that specific moment and they compare it to blockchain. And I'm like, no, you have to go earlier because the internet is basically coming from the 60s. And it took about 10 or 15 years just to get to a point where all the nodes agreed on a single standard, which was TCP/IP. And then it took another 10 years to get to a point where there was like a web page. And then from Web 1, another, 10, 12 years to get to Web 2, and now we're here. We're so early that when people ask me, I'm like, it's probably going to take 20 years to get to a place where I feel like there's something valuable, and Web2 will disrupt completely what I think needs to be disrupted. And right now, I'm just running experimental fund, and I'm learning and just go along the way. There's a lot of money to be made during that time, but it's going to take time.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with everything people have said. I think from, Outlier Ventures perspective, running as an accelerator is given us kind of quite an interesting, perspective on the space, because in many ways we are kind of an intermediary, and so we see which startups that we work with are A, more difficult to work with and more easy to find product market fit, but B, more or less attractive to, investors that we'll work with. And, I think that we've been running for a while, but we've been an accelerator since 2019, and I think, we started investing a lot in the infrastructure layer, accelerated Boson protocol. In the early days, we were very much infrastructure layer, but now are kind of progressing towards the consumer level. So, we're running a partnership with Farfetch at the moment to accelerate more kind of like luxury and digital fashion. And so I think that really says a lot about the fact that you start to see a lot of, not only like investors, not only Web3 maxis, but like a lot of kind of just general consumer and retail brands trying to figure out, what's going on and trying to figure out how and if they can be a part of it. So I think that in that sense, despite being in a lower market, it's really a time where the desire and the curiosity and the retail level interest is still really coming into the space, and I think that that's really unique.
At least for us, we're very much focused on around kind of the transition from Web 2 and Web 3 and kind of the enablement of both existing, I would say, models in Web 3, but also looking at a next wave of potential applications that would run on Web 3. What is kind of the main thesis that you are following, and what areas are you excited about in terms of investments?
So one of the main theses is obviously the idea of Web3 and the idea of ownership on the internet, the ability of people not only to be able to share, but actually to be able to own a piece of the internet. And that brings us to opportunities like metaverse and games and other worlds that will be built, as well as interoperability between the different aspects, and technology that makes it seamless. Because I think this is one of the biggest issues today in onboarding. But we've already seen in 2021 the first clues of retail interest, and I think that it's because there were already a few applications that made it fun for consumers, and that's going to be really important for mass adoption. If you really think about how we got into where we are today with Web 2, things were easy, seamless, and fun. You were able to kind of go on Tinder and look at people and enjoyed the experience.
For me, the higher thesis, without getting into the specific sector that I'm interested in, is, if you think about Web 2, and it's interesting to say, transition from Web 2 to Web 3, because although we do say that Web 2 will be complementary to Web 2, Web 3 brings something that is fundamentally different from Web 2, to a point that I think it's disruptive to Web 2, and so transitioning from Web 2 to Web 3 is really hard to do conceptually. The way that I see it is, Peter Thiel said that if you want to build everlasting value, you need to build monopolies. And it's a great model if you're early, because you're building a lot of monopolies, and then at some point there's so many monopolies that you're entrenched and you have made a lot of money. But this is a big threat to innovation. It's basically stopping startup from building, from innovating, from doing stuff. Sometimes they have to basically build on top of platform and then get deplatformed because things changes. And Web3 basically changed that fundamentally to a point where in the previous panel, people talked about Google and will there be a Google? I don't know if there's going to be a big Web3 company. There's going to be a lot of fragments of communities that are going to work together, and that makes sense. And that would be complementary to Web2. So for me, this is my main motivation. I think the world is going that way. And then within that, we are personally investing in infrastructure, developer tool, things that basically allow developers to do a lot of experiments and do them pretty quickly to get a very quick feedback loop. We like to invest in consumer that enhance the user experience. For example, we invest in Zango. So we like when things are like super simple. We think there's a need for that. And we also like to look at regulation tech and compliance tech. Basically will allow the Web2 and traditional finance to kind of adapt Web3 and understand, you know, how to operate with it.
Yeah, for us, I think our thesis is, you know, quite aligned with, you know, what Shelly was just saying. We call it the open metaverse thesis, and what that really means, beyond the two big words that people aren't really sure what they mean, is really this idea of, you know, the building both the technology and the spaces for, you know, physical and digital worlds to kind of blur into each other. So, you know, I know I already mentioned Boson Protocol, but they're a good example of, you know, they're really building at the infrastructure layer of decentralized commerce. We've worked with a number of kind of virtual world startups, from Superworld to a company that went through our accelerator before, called, you know, Metropolis World, which actually have an NFT drop one of these days. Going forward to, you know, some portfolio companies that are in the audience here that are building kind of more infrastructure layer for moving assets across and through virtual worlds. So essentially, if there's one kind of high level that motivates, you know, companies that end up going through our accelerator, as well as, like, you know, people that we partner with, it's really this idea of building out the technology and the space for the physical and digital spaces to eventually blur into one.
You spoke briefly around like exits and what will be kind of what is the current framework for exiting through the tokens. Do you see a world where there are acquisitions? This is kind of becomes the main exit path, or what will be kind of the structure where we're combining, you know, two economies, let's go together?
It's actually an interesting question. I think about it a lot. Wouldn't it be interesting to see these kind of buyout private equity type funds that are buying networks and taking over the token and building new models and finding a way to turn something around and, you know, be a distressed crypto fund, for example. Yeah, I mean, I think as the market develops, and there will be different types of investors and different types of expertise, and I think in terms of exit, it's the same. I mean, if you're a hedge fund, then you're trading. If you're a VC, then you're building companies, and eventually, for everyone, it will be different.
That space, I think there's a lot of interesting experiments that have happened. Acquisition and merger, you know, in equity, it's pretty simple. We know how to do it. We've done it, you know, for 2 decades. How do you merge two communities that have like very different incentives? And it happened, for example, with two protocols, Fei and Rari Capital, that basically merged into a tribe. And it started by the fact that, first of all, Fei is a stable coin, and they have raised tons of money. Rari Capital is basically building, has built a lending protocol. And they suffered a breach, and they lost money, and they had like a hole of $10 million from one end. And Fei suffered the fact that they had a lot of money, but they needed the lending protocol of the place to really get crazy demand. So they started talking together, and then they went to their community, and they told the community, look, we want to merge, and we need to find a way to do it. And you know, when you talk to communities, there are so many stakeholders, it's crazy. But they ended up talking to each other, and then at some point they decided to merge. They decided that basically there would be a conversion from one token to another, and they decided to do that based on a 14 days weighted average price, and they did that merge. And one side was pretty upset because they got a short stick in that conversion. And then a couple of weeks ago, they decided to shut down and basically undo the merge. But it's pretty interesting because this is, I think, an experiment that we show, and there have been a couple of other that have done that. Another thing that I've seen as an experiment is the Graph, which is a portfolio company that started acquiring company. But the way they've done that, they gave them like pretty big grants. You know, usually grants are like 500K, 1 million. They're literally giving $80 million grants of tokens to companies that have been operating in the space. But that company doesn't join the graph, they just join as core developer, meaning that they can do other stuff, which is kind of where the world is going. You know, we're not going to have a mono relationship with company. We're going to be working with several companies. So they've done, I think, 5 acquisitions. They basically brought really 5 strong companies to build on top of the graph and improving. And it really aligned the interest because they have tokens now, and those tokens can accrue value over time.
Yeah, I think an interesting space to look at acquisitions, or rather mergers, is the DAO tooling or DAO framework space, which is a particular interest of mine. Right now, the joke between Evan, who gave one of the DAO workshops yesterday, and myself is that there's more DAO frameworks. There's pretty much as many DAO frameworks as there are DAOs at the moment. I don't know if he said that during the lecture yesterday. I hope he did, because it's a funny one. But I think that's really a space where, you know, I can think of already a few examples of this has already happened, but there's a lot of different, very small, very new projects that are building one individual aspect of this kind of, I guess more broadly what you see it as like kind of like a CRM or a project management software or something for DAOs and decentralized communities. And I think that underneath all of this noise, there's really a lot of potential for all of these tools to somehow, and eventually we'll see them do that, to merge into, you know, a few big ones trying to do the entire kind of, you know, project management or lifecycle management of DAO communities. So I think that that's really a space where there's a lot of small players that are trying to cover individual aspects, and as the space becomes more developed, and as these companies kind of specialize a little bit more, we're going to definitely start to see a lot more mergers between them.
So we're coming closer to the end of this, so wanted to address probably one of the most important elements of our investments, and those are kind of the teams. What do you see, or what are you looking at when you're investing in a company in Web3? Is there specific elements that you're kind of honing in that are different from like other areas?
To be honest, for me, no. I look for the same things. I look for founders that first of all have a great team, have a great ability to engage other people, investors, employees, customers, that have the talent and capability to build great products and the agility to change and pivot if they need to. And here specifically, I'm looking for founders also that have a very high level of ethics, because in this space, because it's a very young space, it's almost like the Wild West. You have to have a very high level of trust in these people to ensure that their heart is in the right place and they're not going to be subject to moral hazard that kind of comes with you know, the hype in the industry.
Yeah, it doesn't really change. I think the core is the team or the people. The team can be very big. It doesn't have to be like one founder or two. It could be like an extended team. And when I look at a team, so Shelly summed it up pretty well. You know, high integrity is very important, because when you're investing in equity, you have check and balances. You have you know, local regulation. You have veto rights. You have a lot of things that you can basically make sure that the company stay on course. When you invest in a company that at some point launch a token, it's basically very hard to you know, to put those check and balances. And the question is, because we're going, you know, toward a future where there's going to be polygamy in how we work with companies. So, do we allow founders to work on several protocols? Or be part of several DAOs? There's so many questions that I don't have the answer today, but I want really focused founders who have wants to you know, solve a problem and have the ability to pivot. And the most important thing after the integrity is leaders. Like, how I want to see especially in the token environment, I want to see someone can build around him like a community of people who are willing to contribute and work sometime for free for a very long time. It's very different. It's not so different from building a company, but here sometimes you have to attract people who are, somewhere you don't even know their name. They're anonymous, and it's a different skill set than building a regular company.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that was just said. I mean, definitely the founder is the most important thing, and I think that, in addition to focusing on the qualities that we find admirable in founders, I think it's also important to highlight the qualities the red flags to look for, So, one example is, it's good to see people that are kind of aware of their difficulties, that will honestly tell you about their shortcomings, because it shows that they're aware of those things and that they're not, just trying to kind of please the crowd. It also shows that they have a good knowledge and that they have an ability to analyze those issues and figure out how to address them. That really plays in a lot into the integrity aspect. So that's one for me that I often look for on investment committees.
So thanks everyone for joining us, and I think now we're off to lunch. So.